maybe we can start and then we'll just have people join in as they do. So welcome everyone. Thank you for attending. My name is Bridget Jones. I'm a pediatric psychologist in Dayton. I work at Dayton Children's Hospital. I'm doing integrated care and primary care there. I just was licensed last year, about a year ago, as of last month, a year ago in April. So this is all very fresh to me. I understand how stressful and exciting and all of the feelings that can come from trying to get licensed. So we'll kind of go through the PowerPoint. If you have any questions, feel free to either use the chat or just kind of jump in and, ask to pause. We will be taking questions at the end with a group of panelists. So we will have time at the end for more in-depth questions for our panel. And that's kind of nice to have lots of different experiences to discuss too. So we'll have questions at the end, but feel free to use the chat if there's any as we go through the PowerPoint. And then I'll actually have Haley introduce herself as well now, because she and I will be moderating the PowerPoint and presentation.
Hi, everyone. My name is Haley Shea, and I am, I guess I don't even know what's relevant here. I currently work at Miami University, so I'm actually not practicing clinically. I'm teaching and doing research at this point, but that is something I'm getting into probably in the next few years. That's my intention. But I was recently licensed in June of 2021. So a little bit, just a couple months after Bridget, like more fresh. So also very familiar with the feelings, the mental cognitive process that folks who are trying to get licensed are going through. So nice to see everyone, and happy to answer any questions as we go through.
Great. All right. Thank you, Haley. Okay, so we'll go ahead. So again, Haley and I will be moderating, and then we have our panelists. We have one panelist who had to drop out last minute just due to some other issues. So Jennifer Riley will not be with us, but the four of us will have a great panel for you at the end. So objectives for today's presentation is just to talk about all the different steps in detail of the licensure application process, to talk about the APPP and the jurisprudence oral exam, the content of both of those, study strategies, scheduling, all of the things associated with those tests. And then at the end, kind of discuss credential banking and then mobility and various state requirements. And like I said, finally, we'll have a Q&A with panelists. So let's start at the very beginning. Step one, when you're thinking about applying for licensure, the first thing that you want to do is you want to just go to this website that we have and just kind of create your overall application. So this application it will just ask you a series of questions about your background history, your training experiences, degree, things of that nature. There is a fee associated with it. I think that's also a piece of licensure that gets challenging, is it is pricey for sure. So we'll go through the different prices, but for just to kind of apply for licensure overall, it is $300. So keep that in mind. I'll take you to this website, the Ohio Board website, and let me know if you can't see anything. But this is kind of this is the login page.
We can't see the login page.
Oh, you can't see it.
Mm-mm.
Thank you for telling me that.
You might have to change which view you're sharing. There you go. That's good.
Yeah. All right. I'm a newbie. I don't work from home. I work at the hospital. So I sound like 2 years into a pandemic. I should be better at this. I'm not. Anyway, here is the website. So you'll go here and you'll log in or create your account. And then this is where you start the actual application and license. So you just would say, I don't have a license. And it will ask you to create a new account. So it goes through password, your name, and then, like I said, it will ask you for specific background, training history, personal information, demographics, things of that nature. So that's the application, and we'll get more into the other forms and other materials next, but you'll have to pay that $300. Then you'll submit the application with the fee and then wait for the board to review your application. It didn't take too long for that to happen for me, and we can maybe check in with other panelists about this, but I feel like it was a pretty quick turnaround. The board will then enter your information into the online EPPP registration system, and you'll get 2 emails. The first email will be just advising that the board has uploaded your information into that EPPP registration system, the ASPPB. And then the second email will be to say that you have the information to verify your account now, and you can begin the registration process. So the second email, you have 90 days to verify the account. Doesn't mean that you have to take the EPPP in 90 days. So don't worry when you get that email. It's just to start, the next step in the process. So this application, when you first turn it in, like I said, and send that $300, you don't need to have all of this in there at that point. These are things that you'll have to turn in, during your time of licensure and EPPP. These are things that you can turn in at any time, but good to start to get some of these things as you are, waiting to get licensed. So you'll need that official application like we talked about. After you take the EPPP, you'll need that EPPP score, and that is automatically sent from ASPPB. So that's automatically sent to the Ohio board. So once you take the EPPP and pass, that will just be sent to the Ohio board on its own. You'll need your transcript, and that is you only need doctoral at that point. You'll need verification of both your degree and then supervised training hours. So this will have to be 3,600 hours, and it can be from both internship, post-internship, so postdoc. And then if your program is APA accredited, you can take hours from any practicum, externship training prior to an internship. The only thing with this.
Oh, okay. I was just going to jump in and add a caveat, but yeah, you have to wait until after either a certain number of hours or a certain number of credit hours. So you want to make sure that you're not counting until after that point.
Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly. That's a great point. Yes, you can only we can look it up too, but after, yes, a certain amount of classes and coursework. And then, and all of these have to be signed off by your supervisors at each of these training sites. So you'll need all of your past supervisors and current supervisors to sign off and say, yes, they did this X amount of hours. So they will all sign that off. They all have forms online that are available, which I can even just show you now as well. So let's see. When we're looking, so this is this is on the Ohio Board of Psychology website, so you can easily access this. So when thinking about these hours, let's see down here, I think there is. So verification of these 3,600 qualifying supervised training hours, there's different forms. So you'll come on this website and there's a form for each of these. So let's say doctoral internship, you need 1,500 to 2,000 hours. If you have an APA accredited internship, you'll use this form A. If you have a non-accredited internship, you use this form B. So it takes you through. It's pretty clear which forms that you need. And I'm sure that they will correct you if there's, another form that you might need, but it's pretty straightforward. You'll need a background check, which that's usually less than $100, but still another fee you'll have to pay for. And then you'll have to download the oral examination preparation manual. And then you'll have to return it to the board with just signed acknowledgement that you reviewed it. And of course, take then the oral jurisprudence exam.
I just want to jump in real quick.
Yeah.
For the forms for each stage of training, just get it signed, print the form, get it signed, just have these forms ready, because this was the longest part for me, is banking all these forms. It took me months to hunt down my internship training director. And if they leave, then you have to like find someone else to sign for you, and they might not know you and they need all this extra stuff. So if second you're done with something, get it signed off, because people, or they pass away. There's lots of things that happen. So at any stage where you can get that form done or get something done, highly encourage you to just get that little piece done.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's a great point. And you most likely will have to hound some of them for these forms to be completed. I know I did. Some of my supervisors were great, got it to me in 2 days. Others I had to remind several times. So I think they're probably used to that. So reminders are always, I think, a good option. Okay, so a few notes about all of that application process. For non-accredited degree programs, so if you're coming from a program that is not APA accredited, and this is on that website that I just showed you too, but you're required to demonstrate 36 hours, 30, that'd be great, 36 hours, 3,600 hours of supervised training. And at least 1,800 of those will have to be postdoctoral. So that's something to keep in mind if you're coming from a non-accredited program. Using, like we talked about, using practicum hours, it could make getting licensed in other states more challenging because it just depends on the other states' requirements for postdoc hours, internship, practicum. So, good to keep that in mind, that might be a factor if you're thinking about moving, or other states you're thinking about might be worth looking at the requirements of those states. So with taking the HPP, you can technically take it as soon as you graduate. But in order to take the oral exam, you have to meet the certain postdoc hours. So you have to basically have those hours already completed. It's the final step of the licensure process. So you can take the HPP earlier, but might have to take and wait for the oral exam after you've hit the minimum requirement for hours. So we'll talk a little bit more about banking credentials and applying for licensure. They are separate processes, but good to just verify all of your training as soon as you can, similar to what Lisa was saying, regardless of application, just good to have all of that, those supervised hours and training just banked, because you'll use that later on.
We do have a question in the chat asking, what about non-accredited MA counseling psychology programs?
Non-accredited MA counseling psychology program. So for licensure, you'll only need basically information from your doctoral level, like transcript. So I don't mean to call you out, Sammy, but are you asking? So are you asking about, are you in a doctoral program right now?
I am, but it's not a clinical or a counseling psychology program. It's more of a theoretical program. I'm looking at, Jungian depth psychology and Sufi metaphysics. So the master's is in counseling psychology, but my doctoral program is not clinical at all.
Hmm.
Is this only for doctoral level licensure? Yes,
it's doctoral level licensure. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think this is technically only this is for school psychology, clinical psychology, counseling psychology programs that are clinical, at least partly in nature, I believe. If any of the panelists want to jump in too.
That's my understanding.
Yes.
But I'm sorry to take up so much time, but I'm just curious, aren't MA, level counselors eligible to apply for licensure?
For an MA level licensure, they
Right.
are. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Oh, but this presentation is only for doctoral level licensure.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Aha, see, so I'm glad I checked.
Psychologists, yes.
Yes.
Now, where do I go for help for MA level licensure?
That's a good question. Maybe check in with your MA, with your program and see.
My program was in Colorado, so I'm interested in the Ohio, requirements.
Yeah, I guess that would be, it's in a counseling program. I'm sure there's a Ohio Counseling Psychology website, board,
Okay.
organization. Sorry, I'm not as familiar, but I'm sure maybe just looking that up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So
Sorry.
yeah, no, not at all. Thank you so much. I'm just gonna leave because, this doesn't really
Yes.
apply to me.
Understandably. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Go enjoy your evening.
You
Sorry about
too.
the confusion.
No, not at all. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye. All the best.
Thanks. Okay. Good question though. So we'll keep moving. It is confusing with all of different degrees and types of degrees. So the second part, step 2, is scheduling that EPPP exam. So like I said, you can take that as soon as you graduate, as soon as you have that receipt application and fee, you can take that transcript and send it in, showing that you have a doctoral degree. So if you graduate May 30th, you can, as soon as you have that degree, can send that in. You'll have to complete the EPPP application form, which will generate then an EPPP authorization to test email that you'll receive. You'll have to also establish a login account for the Pearson website, because at a Pearson location is where you'll take that EPPP. So through that website, you'll schedule the appointment, you'll pay the test center fee. The fee, this is another part, is $687.50. So that's another piece that's very pricey. Once you pay that fee, you have a 90-day window to complete the exam. So it's good to just pick that day, schedule it on the website, and because you only have those 90 days. So below, these are kind of websites that you can go to. So there's the EPPP candidate handbook to review before the test. And then this other page is just information about EPPP sign up. I think I have that on here too. Let me go to my. So here's what the website will look like. Again, it's the Association of State and Provincial Psychology Boards. And then it just has information about registering, frequent questions. I didn't find registering for the EPPP challenging. It's very clear. It'll send you emails, at every step of the way. So I didn't really find, and that, again, that's just my experience, but I didn't find it too challenging. Taking the test, of course, is different, but as far as signing up and those emails, that will be, you'll kind of get those for every step of the way. They'll give you clear instructions. Okay, so let's say, great, you passed EPPP. Now moving on to the jurisprudence exam. So this is a requirement in Ohio. It's an oral exam. It's now completed virtually due to COVID. You before had to travel to Columbus, but now it's just virtual, which is really lovely. So the questions are just drawn directly from the Ohio Revised Code and Ohio Administrative Code. You'll get this prep manual, and basically you just have to memorize it and memorize all pieces of it. And then at the exam, they will ask you I think 5 questions overall from each part, and you'll just have to recite it back. As far as scheduling this exam, it's up to you, but you can take it as soon as you finish the EPPP. It gets a little bit tricky, how much do you want to kind of recover from the trauma of the EPPP, and then, how much do you want to go quickly into the exam? It's up to you. We can talk about that more with our panelists, everyone's experience. But good to know that the slots do fill up quickly. So, keep that in mind when thinking about scheduling. And then, great, you are licensed, you passed the EPPP and the oral exam, and then you'll get that license card very quickly. I got mine about an hour after I finished my oral exam via email, and then you get the certificate in the mail 2 weeks later. So it's all done at that point. I know there's lots of steps. It does feel great at the end.
Awesome.
Right. I think I'm going to hand it over to Haley now. Yeah.
So now that we've got all the hard part out of the way, right? Just kidding. Just some things to keep in mind as you're considering taking the test, and specifically this first part is the EPPP, right? So as Bridget mentioned, there's a lot of fees associated with this particular exam. So not only the $687 to take the test, but if you have to reschedule or cancel, the earlier the better, right? So the closer you get to the test date, the less amount that you will get back in terms of how much get back from what you originally paid. So ideally 31 calendar days or more in advance and you will have no charge. But if it's within 31 days but more than 24 hours, there's a $87.50 fee. And if you no show, reschedule, or cancel within 24 hours, you just forfeit all fees paid. Basically, you get no money back. So that's just something to keep in mind. Of course, emergencies happen. And it's unfortunate, but this is their general policy. Some facts about the test. So first, when it comes to strategy and when you're thinking about, right, like certain tests that you may have taken in the past, if you answer a question incorrectly, you get points taken off. That is not the case with the EPPP. So it is in your best interest to answer every single question, even if you're guessing, right? Even if you're putting A for every answer you don't know, that's going to work in your favor. And their website says that a quote unquote sizable majority of applicants pass on their first try. So I don't know percentage wise, they don't report that, but what percentage of applicants actually pass on the first try. There are documents online that show how many people, like the percentage of people from each state or from each program, graduate program, passed on their first try. So that's a document that you could search for if that's something you're interested in. And I know, my program had, I think, a 90-something% pass rate on the first try. So that just kind of helps to give you a good idea, because this is largely related to how well you're prepared in your training, right? Because there's just so much information in this EPPP that if you didn't have a lot of that in your grad program, it can be really hard to acquire all of that knowledge to take the test. There are 4 equivalent forms of the EPPP in circulation at any given time, right? So about every 6 months, one form is retired and a new form is introduced. So even if you've heard from someone else what their experience was like, it could be different for you. And there are some versions that are harder than others, but they are weighted differently. So the number you have to then get correct in order to pass the test changes if it's a harder test. So even if while you're taking it, it was my experience, I had no idea how I was doing. It felt nothing like I had prepared. I just, practiced my mindfulness and calmed myself down in the moment. Even if it feels incredibly difficult, that might not be an indicator that you're doing well or poorly, right? So that doesn't necessarily indicate how you're doing. And so that's just something to keep in mind as you're taking the test. When it comes to retaking the exam, you may take the exam no more than 4 times in any 12-month period. So essentially, you can retake the test within 30 days or after 30 days after failing. But if you fail 3 times in a row, you have to then wait 6 months to take it yet again, right? ASPPB recommends waiting 90 days to allow sufficient studying time. So basically, if you didn't pass it, you'll want to then go back and review all of the material that you maybe weren't as familiar with, weren't as knowledgeable about, and restudy ideally within about 90 days. So for the EPPP, so I'll talk about like what the tests look like for each of the 2 exams that you'll have to take for licensure. The EPPP, there are 225 items, 175 of those are scored and 50 are considered pre-test items. Now, I think pretest is a poorly worded representation of what it is. Those 50 items are interspersed throughout the exam. So it's not like the first 50 questions are the pretest questions. Those are basically their way of validating questions for the future. And so those just don't count towards your exam. And so you have no way of knowing which questions are considered pretest questions. So again, it's in your best interest to answer every single question. You do have to bring 2 forms of ID when you go to the testing center. And the ECCP, the testing centers are all still open. You know, they all have varying COVID policies. I don't know what they are at this point, but that's just something to keep in mind. So you do have to attend in person and take it in, you know, with a proctor there. We've already talked about the $687.50 fee. It's $600 for the test and $87.50 for the appointment. So to take for the slot, basically. The first 5 minutes, you have to agree to the candidate acknowledgement statement, and that has to happen within the 5 minutes, or else your exam will be canceled and it cannot be reset. So that is probably one of the more important parts. Make sure that you get that done, and you want to make sure it's thorough, that you actually read through the information, but get it done within that first 5 minutes. And then you have 5 minutes to complete a tutorial. Again, in my experience, it didn't take 5 minutes to do the tutorial, but just know that you have that. And then you have 4 hours and 15 minutes to take the exam. So roughly 4.5 hours if you take the full time. 5 minutes at the end of the exam is allotted to complete a brief survey, just gathering information about you. There are no scheduled breaks. You can take a break and leave, right, with permission of the proctor, but the clock will still run down on your test. So anytime you take to go to a bathroom or get a snack or a drink, that is going to run down your time. The ASPPB does recommend that there's a passing score of 500, but every state has different requirements for a passing score. So the state of Ohio, the passing score is considered a 500. So the range is from 200 to 800. And so Ohio requires a scaled score of 500 and a raw score of 140. But again, every state is different. So that's something to make sure that you're familiar with. Jurisprudence exam. So switching over then to that oral exam, Bridget already kind of talked about this. There are 5 questions. There's 1 from the supervision rules, 2 from general rules and professional conduct, 1 from psychology board laws and rules, and 1 from other Ohio laws relevant to the practice of psychology. Now you can have, if you're taking the exam and you either fail a question or you're just like, I have no idea, I need the alternate question, you can do that twice. But I believe you can only do it, they have to be separate questions. So you can't ask for 2 alternate questions on the same area, basically. So that's just something to keep in mind. And that is, as Bridget said, it's literally just memorizing the entire manual, which I believe it's 40 something pages. So it's quite a bit of material that you have to memorize. The EPPP content then, right? So, I'm not necessarily going to read all of this off to you, but there are 8 content areas on the EPPP, and they're weighted differently. So, like in terms of how many questions are represented from each content area. So it can be important to look over it, right? Because assessment and diagnosis and ethical, legal, and professional issues are weighted more heavily than research methods and statistics, for example, right? Which I know, at least in my experience, that was what a lot of people were most self-conscious about. So, you can kind of count that if you get half of those right, that's not going to take that much off of your overall score. So making sure that you're putting more effort into the areas that are weighted more heavily can be a good strategy when studying. When it comes to scoring, the scaled scores that are used by the ASPPB are a conversion of raw scores so that everyone's score is within that 200 to 800 range. Roughly 70% of questions answered correctly for independent practice to get that 500 passing score in the state of Ohio. You do receive an unofficial score report immediately following the exam. So when leaving the test how you did on the exam, which for me was so relieving. And that they don't consider it official until the results are reported to the licensing authority within 10 days. It's my understanding that they're just checking to make sure that you didn't cheat or there's not any evidence of cheating, but your score, that unofficial score, will be your final score on the exam unless there is evidence of something like that. The licensing authority does contact candidates regarding official pass-fail status. I don't remember getting that, but I could have just, again, like Bridget said, been traumatized. I know I was traumatized after taking that test, so I probably just don't remember that email. So when it comes to studying for the EPPP, there are many different options that you can utilize, ranging from pass down materials from people in programs that you've been in. So, from your doctoral program, from your internship or postdoc, people have content curated that they've used to study throughout time. There are many different companies that have put together content or study preparation materials for you, and those vary in terms of what they provide. Some are just books that you read, some have audio files, some have practice tests, flashcards, right? There's all sorts of types of preparation materials. So again, this is another area where doing your research is helpful, and knowing what your personal study strategy and style is, what works best for you. I know I did use the AATBS preparation materials, and I shelled out for the most advanced because they offer coaching, so one-on-one coaching with people that work for their company. And I initially was so against it, I didn't want to, but I also know so much of the EPPP is a mental game, and so my coach was invaluable to me in terms of helping me just stay on track, know how I'm doing, know where I'm at, but also give me like mental strategies for during the test and in the preparation process. So I found it incredibly valuable to have that. But again, it is incredibly pricey. So it can be cost prohibitive for a lot of people. There are 2 official practice exams that are put forth by the or ASPPB. There's so many acronyms. So one is the PEPPPO, which can be taken online, and that's a $55 fee. So those, I believe, are past exams that have been used, if I'm not mistaken. And then the PEPPP is taken under real world testing conditions. You do it at a testing center, and we know from psychology that there's context dependent learning, so it's helpful to do that if that's something you're interested in. It's a little more costly at $115.
Could I add a few things, Lisa?
Absolutely.
You too.
Go ahead, Hannah.
Thank you. So I just to add my experience, I used the academic review, and I know others sort of like split the account with their cohort, like internship cohort, to make it a little bit more affordable. I don't know if that's officially allowed technically or not, but academic review is nice because you log in, and then there are sort of essentially like chapters for each of those sections that you go through, and then there's practice quizzes for each of those sections, and it keeps track of your progress so you can see how you did. And then there are practice full exams for the full length of time, so you can get used to sitting and answering questions for that length of time. It may have been some time since you've done that by the time you sit down for this. So just like the context dependent piece of things with the PEP exam, that can be helpful. And then it kind of gives you a sense of your gaps of knowledge where you might want to review more heavily in certain areas. And then knowing myself, I knew I wanted the real world testing conditions, so I did pay for that. It certainly can be cost prohibitive. My postdoc was willing to help with that, which was nice. Well, I mean, we got some funds, and I chose to spend it on that for myself, and also just being able to know that I knew how to get there and drive there, and how long it would take me on the day of the test. Those kinds of things were going to help me feel less stressed on the day of. So I would recommend that if that's something people are able to do, if you know yourself, and that would be helpful for you.
Sounds like academic review is very similar to the AATBS. That was very similar to what I did for prep.
I used ATABS and Psych Prep. I did both, which were both helpful. I recommend, even if you can't do the like in-person Pearson testing, I highly recommend do a whole sit down practice, like in a nice quiet, like try and recreate the environment, but do a whole sitting of the whole exam, because it is a marathon. I took 4 hours and 14 minutes to finish my exam, and I'm a fast test taker. So it was just, I wasn't expecting to take over 4 hours to finish my actual exam. So sitting down and like taking some, like doing a full test practice instead of just doing it piecemeal is really helpful just to build up your stamina, because stamina is a huge part of it. It's not just your studying, but just being able to sit there for multiple hours was a little jarring. And then we do offer our OPA Early Career Psychologist Committee. We have an EPPP study group that we do once a month. So if you get the emails for that, it's on our ECP listserv. I think we also have it on our general listserv perhaps. But if you're getting ready to take EPPP, we do have that free support group once a month. So that is another option for everyone as well.
A great call out.
I just wanted to add really quickly too, as I was thinking about this, I had access to the recordings, which were helpful. And I think the older ones were DSM-4 and is a man, and then the newer ones I think is a woman. That's more relevant to the current DSM. But I had a 45-minute drive to my postdoc, so that was a great way to study while I couldn't be doing anything else. But I also, knowing myself, knew not to do that on the drive-in because it would be kind of lull me to sleep on the way to work. But I found that to be really helpful in just repeating the information and sort of absorbing it without, and I could start with that without feeling like, oh, I have to like dive into this studying officially. You can just sort of passively listen in a sense. And I think the man tries to inject some humor into it, which was, I suppose a nice break as you're trying to do some more serious study activities too. So I would just put a plug in for that. If you have access to those, that can be a helpful way to start.
Absolutely. Those recordings, I did that on my drive too, is really helpful. Just like get it over and over and over again. And I know, Hannah, you mentioned that your postdoc helped with payments or pay for things. So my grad school paid for my EPPP, but I asked them, and then I asked my postdoc if they'd be willing to pay for materials, so study materials. So, and they said, oh, we've never done that before, but sure. So sometimes it's good to just ask, and all they're going to say is no, if it's no, or yeah, sure. So I ended up getting, $1,600 worth of, exam and materials paid for just by asking. So it doesn't hurt to ask.
That's great advice.
What were the recordings called? Didn't hear that.
I think they're from Academic Review. Lisa, do you think that? Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
But some of your programs, like internship and postdoc programs, may have them saved and they pass them down from year to year. Some do, some don't.
I'd make friends with your older cohort or like older students, more advanced students, because they'll have materials for you. So kind of wink, wink.
And ATABS has recordings as well associated with their study materials. So I listen to those often on walks because I didn't have a commute because it was in the depths of the lockdown when I was studying.
Yeah, I would encourage. I got a lot of my materials from other grad students that had years above me. So I would definitely encourage asking older students in your program about those, because I was able to access recordings, tests, like practice tests, all of the materials for psych prep. So I was able actually to get a lot. Again, I don't know how okay that is to do, but it helped, and I guess I passed, so I guess it did work. So highly encourage, reaching out to other grad students too.
We're going to officially say that you should purchase these materials.
Yes.
Okay.
Officially on the record, purchase the materials.
You should purchase these materials. Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. It's like Netflix password sharing. Sorry, my dog's kind of barking a lot. So other study strategies associated with the EPPP, right? So there's a phone flashcard app that's $30. There are some free versions of this that I had one that emailed me one EPPP question a day. I still get those actually, and sometimes just answer it for fun to see if I remember any of it. I would say about half the time I do. But yeah, EPPP questions via flashcard or emails. Review test specifications from ASPPB. I think this is just knowing as much as possible about what you're walking into is helpful. So for me, knowing these test specifications, how many questions, like what types of questions are there going to be, right? The strategy behind the test can also be important, as important as the actual content. So again, taking practice tests, you've heard multiple panelists at this point talk about that. I believe ATABS had 8 practice tests available. I think 7 of which were like progress style, and then 1 was supposed to mimic the final, the actual test. And then form study groups. So this was, again, I was in the middle of COVID and also wasn't connected with the OPA ECP folks yet. So I didn't do that, but I would highly recommend, just for the moral support, commiserating about the process, because it can feel very isolating to take this exam. Focus on topics least familiar to you. So I know that is hard to do, both in terms of just you don't know what you don't know. So knowing that, which is why taking early practice tests can be really helpful, so that you can assess where, like, what you do know and what you don't know, and then focusing on those parts that are most troubling for you. It's not fun, but it is going to improve your score the most. Check out any new summaries of latest research and theories, right? So right as COVID hit, they were starting to put a lot more questions about telemental health into the EPPP as well as the jurisprudence exam. So just knowing trends in what is popular can be helpful. Take domain quizzes, right? So basically within, like, quizzes within each of those 8 content areas. So knowing, within ethics, the professional ethics, like what are the areas that maybe I struggle with within that, and studying those more. And again, listen to recordings. We've talked quite a bit about that already.
And I just want to jump into, as I'm thinking about study strategies, I think also rely on how you study in grad school. You've been successful up until this point because of the ways in which that you study. So, I knew I needed visualization, and I knew I needed to, study in certain ways. So, trust yourself a little bit. Like, how previously have you been successful with your large exams or comprehensive exams, and kind of follow that same trend if it's been successful for you. So I think just kind of also trusting how that you've gotten to this point because of good study strategies. That's going to be very personal to you, and it's going to look different, than to the next person next to you. So just trust those.
So I see we have a question about the flashcard app name. I believe that it's literally just called EPPP flashcards.
I think so.
It's a really easy, simple name. I forget what the one was called that I got an email every day.
I can look some up maybe as you're going to the next slide, and I can put them in the chat too.
Yeah,
because I think it is pretty clear.
And I also know that, again, a lot of those companies that were on the last slide, like the ATABS and the Academic Review, have flashcards that are just online flashcards that you can do on a phone, a tablet, a computer, that are associated with their materials as well. Good question. So some self-care tips, right, which can be very important throughout the process. EPPP is pass-fail, so you don't necessarily, like, I wouldn't recommend studying to get 100% on this test, because that is probably impossible. I don't know of anyone who ever said that they, got a perfect score, or that they're, I don't know. I tend to be someone who over prepares. That is how I alleviate my anxiety, is I go into things feeling over prepared. And yet I still kept this in mind of, like, studying enough to get that 500 score, which is a roughly 70%. And the ATABS, again, they recommended that you get at least an 80% on their tests to be able to give yourself some buffer room. So as you're taking practice tests, shoot for higher than a 70% on the test, just to give yourself that buffer room. But again, don't shoot for 100. That's not really possible, because it can literally be any content from any of those domains. And no company has a completely comprehensive, like a fully comprehensive content summary of everything that could be on this test, which is pretty intimidating. But set a schedule. This was something that was important to me. So whatever works best for your learning or study style, if you know, but sticking to it, right? Creating some sort of self-discipline around the process. So, you know, if that's, I mean, again, it just depends on how much time you have. I treated this, I took it between first uh my first year of teaching and my second year of teaching. And so I took it in the summer, and I just said I couldn't teach during the summer. And I treated this like a full-time job where I was basically studying 30 hours a week for, I believe, 10 weeks before I took the test. But if you don't have that, right, studying less time weekly, but over a longer period of time is also helpful. And I think I was also a little bit overkill as well. So I don't know if other folks want to jump in and talk about how much you studied or how long you studied, or we could wait until the Q&A. But work together for support and accountability can be really important, right? So working in those groups, asking people the content areas you don't know, but also having people hold you accountable. If there are people there to say, hey, we scheduled a time, you need to be here to help me study as well. I saw both Bridget or Lisa and Hannah turn on your mic.
Yeah, I studied a lot, like 400 hours plus, I think, a lot of time. I was way over prepared.
Sorry, Lisa. I feel like I set my goal for that, and then generally never really reach that. And that's kind of always been how I've done things. So I had one of my supervisors on postdoc suggest like 3 months, but not really to go much more before that, because you may lose some of what you studied any further, you know, or earlier than that. And it helped to set a schedule. So, you know, you have like pick a week where you're going to cover this topic and then take your test, and then a week for the next topic and test. And then when you get to the end of that, you have several weeks to go through the topics that you were less strong on, and continue to do those practice tests, and make sure to give yourself some time for that self-care, certainly. And I would prefer to go in feeling over-prepared, but just with the busyness of my postdoc, I just really didn't have the time. And I really wasn't sure if I was going to pass when I walked into it, and was glad that I did the first time. So also, you know, try to have some trust in yourself and your studying that you will get there.
Mhm.
I think I spread mine out over 4 months or so, and then just I started a study group with my old grad school friends, and we kind of ramped it up, but we did about once a week. We had an hour meeting, and someone would take a different topic, do a quick overview of it, ask if anyone had questions from the assigned reading that we would all assign ourselves for that topic that week. And then we would go through the quiz together, or a quiz, or come up with quiz items and kind of quiz each other. So I really recommend getting like a structured support group. It holds you accountable. And then if you show up and you don't know what you're talking about, then you're not really helping your peers. So it's nice for that accountability. And we also, since we had to do a little recap of the different topic, you know, depending on what week you're presenting, that also kind of helps you prepare and kind of stick with it. So I recommend that.
Mine, just thinking about all of these different experiences, I did my studying over a 6-month span, but that's also because I started studying about 2 weeks after I had given birth to my son, and then I did 6 months after that, because it was all I could manage, working and having a newborn. So I don't look fondly back at that time in my life, because it was horrible. But I did it. I passed on the first try. And so I ideally would have had more time, but I didn't. And so I was able to just kind of, I would find an hour a day, 2 hours a day, waking up really early, so it can be done over a long period of time. Not ideal maybe, but it can happen, especially under lots of stress too. We have, Hannah wrote, so it's recommended to me to complete both EPPP and jurisprudence exam before the end of postdoc, because we did have a question about, can you take the test during, oh, my child. Sorry. Speaking of, sorry, everyone. It's my 2-year-old who I was just talking about earlier. He just came in here naked. Okay, glad you all didn't see that. Sorry about that. Getting back to this. So we had a question about postdoc. Can you take it during postdoc? And I actually did at my end of my postdoc year, as long as you've hit those hours, the 3,600 supervised training hours. And then so Hannah was saying both EPPP and the oral exam before the end of postdoc, because some employers can't hire you until you're licensed, which is a great point. For some, you may be able to start before you're completely licensed, but you have to have the supervised hours to be paid, and maybe paid at that postdoc salary level. And Lisa said I was required to be licensed during postdoc. So you definitely can during postdoc if you kind of get all of the application materials and the hours in.
In most places, most employment, if they don't require you to be licensed, prior to starting, require it within a certain amount of time of being hired. So the sooner the better, really. I'm sure you all know this just from being in doctoral programs, but be kind to yourself, give yourself breaks along the way. We can't possibly, right? Burnout is very real in everything, but including in this EPPP studying process. So giving yourself breaks and rewards to, keep motivated and also prevent burnout as much as possible. So state requirements and mobility, every state where you are intending to get licensed has different requirements, or jurisdictional areas have different requirements for psychology licensure. And so it's important to go and look at what those requirements are for each state that you're potentially interested in going to. Now there are means and methods to be able to either, get licensed in multiple states or transfer license, or I guess obtain licensure in another state after already being licensed in, say, Ohio. There's a lot of resources here. I particularly am not super knowledgeable about this. So if folks have questions, all of these, we have a bunch of resources on here, but if folks have questions, some folks on the panel do have knowledge about some of these licensure mobility points, I guess, and resources.
I would recommend in general, if you don't know if you want to be in Ohio forever, I mean, sounds like most of you are probably doing your training here, but like if you don't know where you're going to end up, I would choose a state that's really strict or has a lot more requirements and just try and meet those requirements. California is pretty strict, like see what to find. And there's a resource that has all the requirements for licensure kind of broken down by state. Also, we can kind of talk about this later, but you have to renew your license, and there's all these requirements and stuff for after you get licensed. It's never ending road. But yeah, I would always try and meet the criteria for a strict state, just so you don't have to do all these extra things or get new documentation or all this stuff later on. So I'm happy to talk a little bit more about mobility and banking hours. Are you guys going to chat about that? Banking hours?
I don't know much about it, so feel free.
Okay, so as far as banking goes, so I did SciPro, which is on one of the links on the PowerPoint slide. I think the slides are not up anymore. I don't know.
I can put it in the chat if that would be helpful, or do you want me to go back to that slide?
Oh, either way. So SciPro is, I think, as a second from the bottom. I can't see the slides up anymore. That's a good banking system that Ohio uses. Georgia, which is another licenses of mine, they use the same system. So all my stuff was banked, and I started doing that, even before I graduated. Oh, thank you, SciPro. Yeah, SciPro through ASPPB. So also SciPact. So if you want to do telehealth across state lines, all three used it. So mine were a breeze in that sense as far as license mobility and practicing go. So I'd recommend bank your hours, bank the paperwork that we talked about earlier, bank all the things that you can beforehand. It's really helpful.
Also, about what you mean by banking.
Yeah, so banking. So SciPro, or if you're ever interested in, so there's different organizations kind of depending on what your goals are in the future. So SciPro is just this online portal where you can bank or store forms, your transcript, your EPP scores. So all the things that you're always going to need. So instead of having to go every single time you want to apply for a different license in a different state and have to get all that paperwork again and again and submit it, if you bank things in like a kind of online portal or cloud, then you literally just start a new application and it will send all that information already ready to go. For example, getting a transcript doesn't seem super hard, but if you have to get an original transcript from your grad school and have that mailed to another state, it takes forever and it really delays the process. So if you can do Cypro or another sort of banking website, it's really helpful. There's pros and cons depending on which one you use. So Cypro only has certain states that are part of it, but that's this one I chose. And then there's also the National Register. It's kind of a whole separate organization. And there's a scholarship that you can apply for. Pretty much everyone gets it. So you can start banking through that organization as well. So there's a couple of different ways to bank your hours and bank all those forms and transcripts. Also, if you're ever trying to get board certified in any discipline, ABPP is also really helpful, and you can start storing all those documents and stuff too if you're ever trying to get board certified after you get licensed. That's kind of an extra thing. So lots of ways to store all of those forms, but I highly recommend choosing one of them and starting that process.
I agree with Lisa. I have heard from some colleagues who are later in their career who have tried to do this for the SIPACT, the telehealth across state lines licensure, and have had quite the nightmare trying to get transcripts from their organizations or signatures from whoever is now the DCT at their former programs and those kinds of things. So I think I will tell you, it is very time intensive. So try to find a way to do that, or do it in pieces, or find a way to do it when it fits best into your life, because it does take some time to collect. And just so you know, there's a difference between the whole credential banking piece, where you're getting information about each of your courses in graduate school and you're out, sort of really going through your hours, versus what you might need to do for like the SciPact piece. I think there's less that you have to do for SciPact. I also did SciPro ahead of time because you do get that early entrant fee where it doesn't cost as much money if you're still a trainee. So that piece, and my understanding is that with SciPro, you can then use that application towards SciPact. So it's like less things you'll have to do, like Lisa was referencing earlier. And just for those of you who might be doing a postdoc in a different state but want to be coming back to Ohio, you can take the EPP in any state, and that will count towards your license in any state, whereas the jurisprudence exam is specific to Ohio, and each state will have different requirements. Some may have a jurisprudence or ethics type exam, and then even sometimes even more complex requirements, like Lisa was mentioning. I think that's all I have about that.
Great, thank you. So I think at this point we just wanted to open it up for questions from any participants towards the panelists.
So I can't apply for the EPP yet because my degree hasn't been conferred yet. But are those dates kind of hidden from the public? Like there's not dates out there for EPP until you can sign up for them somehow?
I'm pretty sure you have to register first, and then you get a link that shows the different dates to choose from. So it also depends on your location. So, if you're in Columbus, there's more testing centers. So it depends on your location and where you're looking for. So I think you have to be registered first, is what I recall.
Okay. And once they're registered, are there a lot of them that pop up, or are there just like a couple, or?
Again, it depends. I wanted to take my EPP fairly soon, and they were booked out when I was in Atlanta doing my postdoc. They were booked out like months in advance if I wanted to go anywhere within like a 2-hour radius. So I was like, I'm just going to do a little mini vacation. And I ended up going to Chattanooga and Tennessee because it was like a 2-hour drive. I'm like, I'm going to go take my EPP Saturday morning. And so I drove Friday night and made a little celebratory weekend after it. So it depends on your location and how far out they're booked. I would definitely be flexible. And, if you're willing to drive an hour, you're going to have a lot more flexibility with that. So keep that in mind. And they kind of have all different times of day, like start times, depending on the location as well. So it really depends, but I would keep your locations open if you can.
So Samuel, I assume you're going to take yours in the Cincinnati area, or you would prefer to take yours in the Cincinnati area. I took mine in, what's the area that Kings Island is in? What is that called?
Mason, yeah, a little up north.
That's where I took mine, and I think it was pretty limited when I scheduled it. There were maybe like 8 times that I could see. Again, they were in pretty well into the future, and there were only like 8 times available. So just to give you an idea, in your location, there weren't a ton of options.
Remember, you can register, and then you don't have to schedule a time within those 90 days. You can register, you have to verify your account within 90 days, but then you can schedule far in advance from there.
And I think this might depend on the person, but I scheduled mine out again, I did take longer. I took 6 months to study, but I did schedule mine out, and it was a nice thing to have that date in mind and schedule it. Of course you have that a limited time window, but it was nice to have that date. I knew I had to, do X number of hours each day in order to get to that date. So even if you do have to schedule out, I do think that can be helpful if you're, in the beginning of the study process to know, I think I was aiming for a certain amount of hours per week. So I planned, around that. I know people who don't like to do that at all and don't like to have that date in their mind, but I found it to be helpful.
Yeah, I would say if you do that, just make sure you set that calendar alarm for more than 31 days out in case you aren't meeting your goals and you want to reschedule.
You'll also want to think as far as not just are you prepared, but for your job, for example, if you have interviewed and now they're like, you start June, whatever, you better make sure that your ECCP is going to be done by then, plus all your other licensing side. Sometimes there's wiggle room, but like on postdoc, I was required to pass my ECCP by a certain date or I could not continue on. So I really had to plan that. And it's also why I went to Tennessee, because I'm like, oh crap, all the dates are filled. I need to do this now and hope that I pass. Also got to keep that in mind too. So just in case you didn't pass, you have to wait, so kind of keep that in mind too. If your job or your postdoc requires you to get it by a certain time, just want to make sure you're planning ahead.
There are a couple of states too that I think Samuel might handle it a little bit differently. So it might be worth checking into things. I know somebody who you can apply for in Colorado, you can apply for temporary licensure before you are, I don't know if you have to hit the credit hours. I'm not 100% sure about that. Do you know, Lisa?
In Georgia, I got a temporary license and I can't remember. I was just missing one piece of it. Maybe it's the ECCP, I can't remember. But yeah, depending on the state, you can get a temporary license, which means you've done everything else that you need to for licensure, but you're missing one piece of it. Maybe it's the jurisprudence, it's something like that.
Yeah. And then I think that allows you to take the ECCP in that, but it doesn't have to be in Colorado to do that. I think you could take
Correct.
the ECCP wherever. So something.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I took it in another state. It's fine. You just got to tell them where you want it sent, and then they'll send it there.
I had a couple of things to add about the day of testing, but I didn't know if other people had questions. First. Okay. Well, I took mine pre-pandemic, so I don't know if any of this has changed, but at the testing center, there was a lot of in the rules as far as like you can bring water, but the water can't have like a label on it. It has to be see-through, and nobody checked that when I brought it in. I don't know if that's going to be the case now, but you keep everything in a locker outside of the actual testing site. And it's very official. Like you get like walked one at a time into the room to your seat, and there may be people around you who are taking a completely different exam. So there may be people getting up at various times after a short period of time. So don't take that as like, oh, that person finished their ECCP in 20 minutes. It might have nothing to do with psychology. At least when I did it, they give you noise canceling headphones, but they were really tight on my head and kind of gave me a headache. So I ended up not wearing them. And again, I don't know if that has changed in the pandemic as far as cleanliness and keeping that stuff clean. But I also had somebody near me who was humming. And it was very distracting while I was trying to take my test. And you can actually ask the proctor to come up to you and you can tell them if something is happening in the exam situation. So I raised my hand, I waited for her to come over and I just said, I'm so sorry, but like the person next to me is humming and I can't focus. And she went up and talked to the person and the poor lady like didn't even realize she was doing it. You know how some people do that when they're really focused, and was very apologetic, but then stopped humming, and that helped me finish without being very distracted. So that is a piece of things that is an important part to know as you navigate the actual test itself. And if they still do this, you get like a whiteboard and a marker where you can write some things down. If you're somebody who like wants to write A, B, C, D and cross things off as you're thinking through, sort of eliminating responses and those kinds of things. So just knowing some of the test tricks like that is helpful. And the other thing is, I don't know if this is actually true or if this has been passed down in other programs, but I had heard that as you're standing there waiting for your piece of paper to print out, it's 1 page if you pass and 2 pages if you don't, because the second page gives you scheduling information. So I can only speak to, passing because that's what I got, but I know that there's a lot of about what's happening when it comes out of the printer.
Yes, 1 page is good.
I think we have a question about internship from Catherine, or I guess about a postdoc, doing a formal postdoc. Catherine said, I would be fine with staying in Ohio and practicing here. I just worry, what if something happens down the road? I need to move to a state that requires a postdoc and I didn't do it. Is it typically advised that you should do a postdoc just in case? Is it really difficult to backtrack if you don't have a postdoc? Do any of our panelists have thoughts about this?
I do, but I would wait for somebody else.
My personal thought, kind of like I said before, is kind of, do the most requirements that you can so that you don't have any issues anywhere. That being said, if that's not in your plan, that's fine. There's always ways to figure it out. So you're not necessarily like, you don't do one and you can never get licensed somewhere else that requires a postdoc. You might have to go get a formal postdoc later, or there's also different ways to get formal training that isn't necessarily at a postdoc. So some states just say, you need supervised training in a certain area. So there's ways to get different types of more formal experience, even if you didn't officially do that. But I would say do a formal postdoc if you want to be safe and just really keep your doors open for wherever you might end up. I think it's just a lot easier down the road just to do it. But I know tons of people who, didn't do a formal postdoc, and it's going to be harder later on, but it's doable.
Separate from states, some employers may require it. So I work at Nationwide Children's Hospital, and many of the places that I was applying required a postdoc for the job, even if it wasn't specific to Ohio. And so that was always recommended to me, at least in the area that I want to practice, which is the pediatric psychology piece of things, that you do the postdoc. And I think, like everyone's been saying, it's easier to transfer if you need to, but it isn't.
It's a really good point of like being field specific, right? Or like area specific. I am very much just a counseling psychologist, general adult practitioner. So there's not a lot of field specific requirements. I did not do a postdoc or a formal postdoc. I did an informal one, sort of. And for me, I looked into the states that I knew that were likely that I might move to. So, my home state and my husband's home state seemed like, good calls of where I could possibly move. Neither of them required a formal postdoc to be licensed in those states. And so I just decided it wasn't necessarily in my best interest. I also, I mentioned I currently do research and teaching. I had a job lined up that wasn't clinical, and I knew that I needed to get into that job if I wanted it. And so basically for me, it was just not in the cards for me. And I just accepted at that time that it might be harder right? I was aware that it might be harder down the road if something were to happen, but that, everything in this process has been hard, and I know that I can do it if needed at the time when it happens. So again, just trusting yourself that it is possible.
I want to add another thing now that I've heard both of yours too. So I'm a neuropsychologist. We have to have a 2-year formal postdoc.
Yeah.
No questions asked. Does not matter. Have to have that. So I'm a little bit more biased in that sense too. Like I have to do it regardless. Also, my job requires that I get board certified. So board certification, depending on which we look at, also have different requirements. So it depends what your long-term goals are. I didn't even know what board certification was when I was in grad school. So if you don't know what it is, it's fine. If you want to be a neuropsychologist, you have to do a formal postdoc because it's also required for board certification. So if that's something you've heard of before, board certification, you're going to need to do formal postdoc. I want to say for most of them, but I know definitely for neuropsychology and forensic and a few other ones. So depends what your career goals are, depends what setting you're working in, depends on the state. But if you want to make it generally easier for yourself and keep the options open, do a formal postdoc, but not at the end of the world if you don't.
That's a great question.
Mhm.
Any other questions or thoughts that we didn't get to?
I was just going to ask for recording those hours either during postdoc or the informal postdocs. If the hours still count as postdoc hours after you get your licensure, if you're still being supervised, because like certain states require a certain amount of hours during postdoc, but if you get licensed, you're still being supervised. You still would want to record those hours, I would assume.
Yeah,
But
I think I was licensed in April, and I had two or 3 more months of postdoc, and those were still postdoc hours. And it is a weird question. So I had my license, and I remember going to my supervisor and saying, I'm not practicing right on my license. I'm still under yours. And she said, you're still under mine. You have that, you're just not practicing under it yet. So anything that you're practicing under your supervisor's license is still your postdoc hours. It's a weird conundrum that you're in a little bit, because you're like, well, I have my license now, but it's definitely still counts as postdoc hours.
You could do both. I got licensed kind of like what Bridget was saying. So I was also licensed during postdoc working under my supervisor, but I also did some private practice stuff on the side. And I was then not counting that towards postdoc hours, but I was counting that towards like post licensure hours. Not that you need to record those, but like, so that was a little bit of a separate thing, but I was able to use that license in different ways. So if you're on postdoc and you're still under someone's supervision, yes, you're licensed, but you're not. Those hours are still postdoc hours.
and the hours that are postdoc hours are like any hours that you're seeing patients or still receiving some supervision for those patients. I guess what you're saying is that if you saw patients over there, if you weren't receiving any supervision for that, you can't count that as like postdoc hour, or is that?
Yeah, postdoc is supervised hours.
Okay. So
There's that part of postdoc is kind of that formal supervision.
One of the things I wanted to add about the jurisprudence exam, I found like little chunks of time just to do like one section, because it's a lot of like one sentence and then here are 8 parts of that to memorize. I know it's bringing back a little bit of trauma memories for everybody who's taken it. And so, I would like, while I was doing laundry, I would just do one section and then use those mnemonic devices that that we know so much about to just memorize. I don't know if this part has changed either, but my recollection is that they ask you the prompt of like this rule for this thing, like, if domestic violence comes up in a session, here's what you need to know about that. And I think you're asked to give like 6 of the 9 of the subheadings to that question. So do your best, memorize all of them. And some people found it helpful to put it in their own words so that they could really understand what they were memorizing so that they can answer the question better. But then I think that also means you're doing extra work because some depends on who you're tested by. Some people want you to give the answer verbatim, and some want you to be able to give the gist of the law, if that makes sense.
There were some things I truly didn't know what it even meant,
Mhm.
which is terrible. But for those things, I just completely memorized.
Yep,
And for the
it is
most
in
part, those
legalese.
things, though, yeah, exactly. It was legal things, and it was often I would look it up if it was something that was particularly relevant to what I would be doing. There are things in there that like I will never have to worry about as a general practitioner who only sees adults, right? Like, and so if it didn't necessarily apply to me, I wouldn't look it up. But yeah, that's I would verbatim memorize things that I was like, I don't even know what this is saying.
And they want you to pass, which was, it was nice to know. I was coming from out of state. I had to fly and do the whole exam when I was in person. I didn't have this cool presentation that told me some study tips and what to expect. And so I came completely blind and had no idea what to expect. So I memorized every single thing in that packet. And then I was like, oh, I only have to do 9 out of 20 from that list. Great. That's easy. But they want you to pass. So I was there for 5 minutes. That was the whole oral exam. And I had a brain fart on one of the questions, and they were like, what about this? And so they kind of helped me a little, like they didn't give me the answer, but they could tell like I aced the first 4 questions like in 1 second, like breezed through them. And then so they kind of will guide you a little bit, which is just nice to know. They want you to pass. The pass rate is like 95% or something extremely high. They want you to do well, but you have to absolutely study and memorize. But if you are clear that you have memorized and you're doing well overall, they would like you to pass. You need to study.
I only heard of one person that I know that didn't pass the first time, and that was because she had heard it was easy and didn't study going into it, which is just not feasible, right? You have to study, you have to memorize, but if you do that, you will do well. Like the EPPP is not that way. It's like you can memorize as much as you want and you have no idea how you'll do. But with this, if you memorize, you will do well. So
That is a good thing about this. Like it is straight memorization.
straightforward.
EPPP is study skills. So, and like how to read a question. So it's more interpreting the question versus, I mean, you have to memorize it for it as well, but it's a little bit more strategy and knowing how to take the test. But jurisprudence is a pain in the butt, but at least you know if you know the material because it's just memorization.
Mm-hmm.
It did feel very anticlimactic to be done in about 5 minutes, but also very exciting. And like you said, part of the way through, you know, you're doing pretty well. So it's assuming that you had the chance to memorize. So it's it's done quickly, and then you walk out of there and you're like, okay, I guess that's it. But
And they were
hopefully,
also so kind. I don't know if that was other people's experience, but they
yeah.
were just so nice, which was relieving. I also think a difference from pre-COVID to COVID, I only had one person giving me my exam. And I
I
think
had one.
it was okay. I was gonna say I had always heard that it was more than one.
I think it used to be
Yeah.
I think it used to be a panel. So I took mine in December 2019, I believe.
Okay.
So kind of close to the pandemic. But yeah, I think if you hear from like supervisors who have been in the field for 10, 15 years, some of them, I think there used to be some people on the panel who might have been a little bit more strict or challenging than maybe the people who are currently doing it.
And I think the thing to keep in mind too is when you get your license, and I got mine through the email, I think it's important. I mean, all of this, it's so stressful. It's so time consuming. It feels like it's never going to end. There's always one more thing that you have to be doing or studying for, or one more form or whatever it is. But the feeling of actually getting your license is the best feeling. So I think just, I think have that image, I guess, in your mind of finishing that oral exam and then getting that email. Because there's like no feeling like it after all of the work and sweat and tears after all the years that you put into it. So I think, I want to say, like, we're talking about how stressful it is, and it's very stressful. And, you will get to the other side. You will have that license in your hand, and it's manageable. It's doable. Doesn't take away from how challenging it is, but keep that maybe visual in your head of getting that email.
And also keep in mind, just like I mean, just like there's different requirements for licensure in different states, the exam process is really different in different states. So like in Georgia, I had an oral exam and a written exam, but both were way easier than the oral exam for Ohio. So like,
Interesting.
oh yeah. So even though it was a 2-part thing, it was just a very different process. So that's just something to keep in mind. I'm also licensed in Indiana for COVID, like emergency license. And it took me 5 minutes to apply. And they're just like, do you have a license somewhere else? Cool. All right, here you go.
Yeah.
So
That's where I'm from, so I knew it would be easy.
great. So like literally took me 5 minutes to get licensed in Indiana for like emergency COVID license. So a little bit different process, but a little easier to do some of that license mobility during COVID, assuming they kind of keep some of that around.
Yeah.
I did that for West Virginia as well, because we're in sort of central to southern Ohio and see a lot of patients that come up from West Virginia. And that was pretty easy too. It was like temporary emergency licensure across state lines, but that's now discontinued in West Virginia, but you can still apply for a fee now for temporary licensure for the year. And I think it's something like up to 80 hours or something like that with however many patients. But it depends on the state, like she said, but I think it is doable and isn't necessarily applying for that whole PsyPro, PsyPact piece of things. Potentially, it just depends on the state.
And do you all know what PsyPact is? I feel like we're kind of throwing some of these terms around. Does everyone know what PsyPact is? I only see one video head nod, so Samuel knows what it is. Great. Well, PsyPact is being able to practice telehealth across different state lines for those states that are involved or like kind of approved in network, which is growing and growing. So yeah, another good part about license mobility.
That reminded me of the PsyPro, which is through ASPPB, just throwing out all the acronyms. That is one of the ways you can do the credential banking, but that also applies towards PsyPact, which is the telehealth one. I think it's 23 or something states that participate. So I decided that was worth it because it's about half of the states. So I felt like, okay, that at least, would help me if at some point I move. The likelihood that it would be to one of these states felt worth it.
One more quick question for the forms. Do you send the main forms to the board via email, or is that went through the system as well after the application?
It's all email. The system is archaic in my experience. So yeah, no, it's all via email, all just communicating directly with them.
I thought we did it through a portal. Is that an option? Because I'm pretty sure I did mine through PsyPro.
Oh, see, I think if you do it through PsyPro, it's different. I did not use PsyPro.
And
And
that's
it
where
was all email.
banking comes into play. So I got licensed in Georgia and we had PsyPro. Great. So everything was uploaded already. And then I applied, I just hit new license application, Ohio, paid my fee, sent it all directly there. And then for PsyPact, same thing, started a new application, everything went straight to PsyPact. So very easy as far as mobility goes. So I recommend banking. So then if you do apply another state, you don't have to do all the emails and all that back and forth.
That's a great advice. I mean, honestly, the Ohio, I feel weird saying this because I know this is all being recorded by them, but it was very confusing to try and understand what was required and how to send things just using the Ohio licensure website. So
OPA and the Ohio board.
Those are different. Those are separate. You're right.
You can say that.
Yeah, you're right.
That's why I love portals, because like everything goes straight there. You don't have to wait back and forth with emails. It's bank your hours. I recommend it.
I think you also get like a confirmation when you do that, which is nice too. So for those of us who are like, all right, I sent that into the ether somewhere, I think you do get a response that it was in fact received, which is also nice.
Mm-hmm.
And also, if you bank your hours, some of the programs have like a little check mark next to each thing that has been received and approved. So I also like that part.
Yeah, you don't get any of that if you do it all via email.
right, as we're kind of wrapping up, this has been such a wonderful discussion. Any last questions or things that we didn't get to? And I sent out that email with the PowerPoint, but you are more than welcome to email any of us any follow-up questions. But anything else just with our last few minutes that we didn't get to? Okay. Well, thank you all so much for coming, taking time out of your Wednesday, and good luck with all of this licensure process. I know it's, like I said, so stressful, but so worth it. And, I would definitely also just rely on, the people around you, supervisors, professors, who have been through this. So they can be very helpful and a source of support too. So thank you everyone for coming.